faith that I have taken. So for those of you that know some of my story, it is because of this woman of God here who has prayed for me unwaveringly every single day. And for that, I honor her. I thank God for her. And I'm sure that even as this meeting goes on, it will be covered by the prayer that she is going to give to us. So to start us in prayer. Thank you, Sheryl. Thank you, my friend.
Welcome. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Gail, for being my friend, and thank you to all of the panelists who make up today's session. Thank you for Ypsi Can I Share? A big part of my heart is still in Ypsilanti. I'm on the East Coast, but my son is in Ypsilanti, and many of my friends, my original church home. I would be remiss if I did not shout out to a woman of God who I am looking at, Minister Hazelette Crosby Robinson. Talk about iron sharpening iron. I have to show her some love, because we are never what we are unto ourselves. And I am who I am in part because of Minister Hazelette. So I hope she knows that. I just had to say that. And to Gail, your friendship is priceless. I'm going to lift up the prayer. I just want you to know that when Gail gave me the request, I did not wait until today in this moment to begin praying. I have been praying for you all for a while, because I do believe that prayer is the way that we can move and operate in wisdom and in collective knowledge and understanding. So I don't take it lightly. It's not a game. I don't think I'm cute. It is an honor to go before the throne of grace to ask God to give us what we need in this hour. So thank you for the opportunity. I want to read a scripture very briefly and then usher us into prayer. And unfortunately, because of other ministry obligations, I cannot stay. That bothers me, but I asked Gail if that was okay. So I will pray and then I have to exit. I want to read from Proverbs, the 11th chapter, and it's only 3 verses, and it reads, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." At a time where we are saying dishonest scales, and we're saying duplicity, and we are saying double and triple and quadruple standards that go against everything that our Lord and Savior represents, I am excited that this is the time for us to be activists in whatever way God is leading us. Let us go to the throne of grace. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before your throne, recognizing that you are God and that above and beyond you there is no other. I ask right now in the matchless name of Jesus, who was a revolutionary and whom I believe if he walked the earth now, they would kill him again, because of his concern and compassion for the downtrodden, for the forgotten, for those who were not allowed to be touched, those who were called unclean, those who were unacceptable, those who were considered to be of mixed heritage. I thank you that in the spirit of the Christ who went to the cross so that all could be reconciled back to God, all who he saw as the Imago Dei, the very image of God, I pray an anointing on this group of persons who have come together for justice. I pray that they will not only find the path and heed to the light, but they each individually will be blessed beyond measure. I pray that you fill them up and that out of the overflow of their wisdom and their knowledge and their compassion and their heart for other people, that they collectively advance the agenda that is the agenda of your heart. I pray that you bless every household represented by every person in this call and everyone who even desired to be here. And I thank you in advance, because as a child, we couldn't just sit down and dig into the food. My parents required that we say grace before we ate. So in the name of Jesus, I say grace. I say thank you for the work that they're about to do, the divine ideas they're about to share, the work that they're about to produce. May it bring you honor and glory, and may it change the center that is vile or profane and inhumane to a center that is God-centered and humanity elevating. This is my prayer. This is our prayer, and I'm thanking you in advance for their work. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sheryl. Thank you. And I know that we're covered. I know that I was already covered, but now I guess I can put on these boots and get to walking in it. Okay. Thank you.
God bless you.
Bye-bye. So next on our agenda, we have Attorney General Dana Nessel. How did I meet Attorney Dana Nessel? I heard her at a campaign rally at the Democratic Party, Washington County Democratic Party. And at the time, I had passion because I was putting on senior awareness meetings, because having to go through the things that I went through with my father, I wanted to be able to educate others in advance of it happening, because it was so very painful, because there were no doors of help. And I heard her speak with passion about what she would be doing for seniors. And for those of you who know me, you know that I'm not scared of anybody, and I just walk up and make myself known. And I said, hi, I'm Gail Summerhill, and I like what I heard you say. And I'm having a senior awareness meeting. And she said, I'll be there. Now, I'm going to tell you, at first, I know that I have a name in the community, and I did not know her, but I know what I felt in my spirit as far as the passion. And then when I had to put her on the program, I thought, I got to pray about this, because I can't use my name and have a wrong person. And I'm happy to say today, as I do the introduction, from that first moment, you have been a woman of your word. You have worked tirelessly, coming into a system that was already set before you. Many of the things you are trying to do to the best that you can do, and you are prayed for on a daily, because it is crazy in these jobs of responsibilities. So we take on attacks when we're trying to give our best. And we need to all step back and say, for each person, we're only one person. And it takes villages on top of villages on top of villages to make things happen. But first of all, it takes a person's heart. When they're a good person and you lead from your heart to try to make a difference in this ugly world today. So it is my honor to introduce you to Attorney General Dana Nessel. I can't hear it. I can't. I can't hear it.
There's a chance that the microphone might be all the way down on your computer.
Yeah, I don't hear her either. Or see her.
So I can see her. There's a chance that the sound could be down on your computer. This happens to me sometimes too. If you have a headset nearby, that might help. But there's a chance that it's your sound.
Is she here?
Yep, she's here. We just can't see her. If you have it on this, if you have the mode set where you see folks when their voices are talking, that's probably why you can't see her in the squares right now.
Nobody, there's some chats. Nobody else says they can hear her either, and everybody says they're up.
Yep, I think it's a sound issue. I'm trying to work at, oh. Okay. Let me see. Chat.
She's under the name Amy Stafford.
Yep, I see it. I don't have you muted. Let me mute and unmute and see if that works. Okay.
You still can't hear her.
Yeah, so I don't have her muted. I'm trying to figure out what else could be going on.
Somebody wrote if she left the meeting and re-entered, it might reconnect.
Okay, I think she's trying to do that right now.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone. I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, we just had prayer. That's what happened. Don't you know when you have prayer, then you expect things to come up? It still didn't go in.
All right. I don't think she's logged back in yet. Oh wait, yep, I see her. Okay.
Can she talk by the call-in on the phone, and we'll just see the picture? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I could send one second. Yeah, I can send the details of the call-in information, and then we can do it that way. Sorry, everyone. Let's see if that works.
Well, in the meantime, Gail, thanks so much for doing this.
Whoops.
I mean, just thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like she's gonna call in, so we can wait a few minutes for that.
Okay. They said in the meantime, Hazelette can bless us with a song.
Well,
You
you know,
can,
I really don't know the words to this song, but the only song that really is blessing me right now is the little 12-year-old boy's song, which I believe is our anthem. I Just Want to Live. You guys heard that song? I think his name is Keaton Bryant. Have you guys heard that song? I Just Want to Live.
no, but we'll hear it. Go ahead.
Oh no, I don't know that song.
Okay, we'll sing another song in the meantime. It'll be
Say
okay.
that it rained. You know, y'all gotta be totally unprepared for this.
Y-
Yes, Trisha. Yes, it's a powerful song. You know it? Did y'all know Trisha could sing?
Oh yeah, sang her behind off. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, she just said no, she don't know it because you know what's
Okay.
coming next. No, I don't know that song.
Maybe
But,
and maybe a suggestion, Gail. We go to our next panelist and come back to the Attorney General.
Yes.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Yeah, and by the way, Trisha, you're doing a great job too. So okay, go ahead.
So I would like to introduce, in the meantime, we're going to switch up and go to Jerry Clayton. So we will step back, and when you finish, Jerry, we'll wait for Dana to finish with the technical difficulties. Thank you for coming and participating. We're honored to have you here today to speak on what are the new laws, rules that are coming up for Washtenaw County, and that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Thank you, Jerry.
So thank you, Gail, for hosting this event, and thanks everybody for joining us. So let me talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going. So I think I'll use as a guideline an email that was sent from a group. I think it's called 8 Can't Wait, and they had some demands or thresholds around what most people call use of force. We call subject control, use of force. And they asked, says, look, for us to move forward, there got to be some changes to your use of force or your subject control policy. So we looked at the demands, and the irony there is we've got those incorporated. Anybody wants to know about a lot of our critical policies, whether it be immigration, use of force, body cams, all that's public facing on our website. So there are a couple of things that they highlighted that I want to just point out. So the one of them was ban of strangleholds or chokeholds. Those are already banned in our policy, already banned. A chokehold or a neck restraint, as some people talk about, is a lethal force move because it can result in death. And the only way one of our staff is technically allowed to use that is if in a lethal force encounter. That means they can clearly articulate their life or someone else's life is in jeopardy before they could use that. It's at the same level of using a firearm. So that's already in our policy. It's part of our training. The other one we talked about is de-escalation. So de-escalation is throughout our policy. And I got to tell you, one of the things that we're even going to get stronger on is really assessing that de-escalation. The way we have it in our policy, you can't just de-escalate when you start. You got to reassess that throughout the entire process. And if you don't do that, you're in violation of our policy. A couple other things, just really quick. A ban of shooting at moving vehicles. So that's already in our policy that our staff is banned from shooting at vehicles. Also is banned in our policy is shooting from a moving vehicle. So again, you shoot from or at a moving vehicle, you have to be able to clearly articulate some kind of life and a safety issue, and that's an extremely high standard. Require warning before shooting. That's also in our policy. So unless, again, it's one of those immediate situations where you do not have time, you have to give a warning to someone before you use your firearm. We're also required you have to give a warning before you tase someone. So all of those things are in place. The other one was a duty to intervene. So we not only have in our policy a duty to intervene, but also a duty to render aid. So if you see someone that has been harmed as a result of use of force, you not only have, if you believe it's wrong, then you have to intervene, and you have to be able to render that person aid. You saw an issue of that in the Buffalo video where that 75-year-old man got pushed down and he seemed to be bleeding and there was no aid rendered. So in our policy, you have to render aid. So that's some stuff that's already there. Let me talk about what's moving ahead. So when President Obama had his president's 21st century task force for 21st century policing, there was a whole list of recommendations that were established. There were 6 pillars and then a multitude of recommendations, not just for police, but for the federal government and on, in terms of what's the best approach to changing policing in a way that better reflects what the community wants. I was quietly one of the contributors to that in terms of subject matter experts that they reached out to vet some of the information. And when it all came out, I read it from front to back, and we started to put some things into place in terms of the 21st century. So we've done some of that, and quite honestly, we directed our attention to other things. But in light of all the work going on, what we have committed to is this: we've already started the process. So we will have a public-facing document, a dashboard on our website that has all of the 21st century recommendations around policing on that website, and an assessment of whether we're compliant, partially compliant, or not compliant. And the process for us to get from either partially compliant or not compliant to full compliant on all the recommendation is we're going to form a 21st century, a community sheriff's office 21st century police compliance commission. And we're going to look for people from the public to join that commission to work with the sheriff's office until we get full compliance on all the recommendations. So that goes all the way from hiring to discipline, to policy, to training. So I hear what people are saying. Yeah, it's good to have some of this stuff in place, but unless you have community participation, you're not going to get that sense of legitimacy that's important. And the other thing I'll talk about in terms of concrete things that are going to occur moving forward is we already have a very robust hiring process. It takes about 4 or 5 months to get hired here. We're trying to diversify the organization. We have sponsored several people and paid for them to go to the academy to come onto our police force, a number of them being people of color in the last year. We're going to continue that process. And I'll add this: as part of that, we're going to send out invitations to community members to apply to be part of that hiring process. So when we do an initial interview of a candidate that we're going to hire in the sheriff's office, a community member or two will be part of that process to give input in terms of whether that person should move on in the process. So there are a number of other things that we're working on, but I think the 21st Century Commission and our commitment to inclusiveness of community members as part of that commission, and our commitment of inclusiveness of individuals on our hiring group are 2 of the primary things that we're going to shoot for to start with. I know people have additional questions about other initiatives, but I wanted to highlight those 2 and then yield the floor back to the Attorney General if she's ready, or someone else.
All right. Hi, everyone. She is ready. I just have to unmute or allow the phone that she called in on to speak. And again, my apologies for the technical difficulties.
Wait,
All right.
do you want to put up a picture?
Well, so I think I can edit the name once I allow her time to talk. So I'm just going to bring her over to the panelist side right now. So this is the 248 number. Yep.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, great. Thanks, Gail, for inviting me. Sorry things didn't work out with the video, but yeah. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about what my office is doing right now in regard to issues of law enforcement and their relationship with communities of color, and specifically with the African American community, and a lot of issues that we've just seen involving excessive use of force by police officers and generally by police departments. So one of the things that we're doing at my office is I have really been making a hard pitch all around the state, asking prosecutors, asking sheriff's departments to bring their cases involving suspected, well, anytime you have an officer involved shooting, or when you have an in-custody death, meaning a detainee that dies while they are at the county jail or at a local lockup, or even while they're in a police vehicle. that those cases not go to county prosecutors, but that they go to the AG's office. And I formed a special public integrity unit where I brought in a number of incredibly qualified attorneys. Some have been career prosecutors, but many were career criminal defense attorneys because I wanted a wide variety of views on these. And I wanted these cases to be handled in an objective manner. And unfortunately, what I saw in my time at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office when I served in the public integrity unit there was that, I tried my very best to be as objective as I possibly could. But the fact was, I knew some of these officers I was investigating and considering very serious charges against. And it's hard. It's just hard when you know these people personally. You work with them every single day. I have relationships with some of the people that I was investigating. Maybe those are people that I went to lunch with during the day, or I had a drink with after work, or I went to their kids' birthday parties. And now I got to investigate them and potentially charge them with a very serious crime. It wasn't a good way of operating, no matter how hard you tried to do the best job you possibly could. So I've been encouraging folks to bring those cases to the state because it's very unlikely that we know personally the officers that would be involved. And thus I think it just creates better optics and it's just easier to truly be objective. And the other thing we're doing with those is every time we do have one of those cases, and I by the way, I thank Sheriff Clayton for referring a case to our office involving a Washtenaw County Sheriff's deputy that was involved in a pretty highly publicized case that I know most of you are probably aware of, that, there's an allegation of excessive use of force. And my office is going to be evaluating that case. But what we're doing is a very extensive process in evaluating these cases. And when we are done and we've made a charging decision, the cases that we have declined to charge, we are putting our reports, we're making them public, we're putting them up on our website. And these are very comprehensive and detailed reports. And it will indicate everyone we talk to, any of the videos that we've looked at. It will have laboratory reports, witness statements, police officer reports, all of that stuff. And it'll also have the law that we used and how we applied it to the facts of those cases. So that if we decline charges against a police officer when someone has died or has been significantly issued during the course of their interactions with the police, if we don't charge, you're going to know why. You may agree, you may disagree, but you'll always know exactly why we did what we did. It won't be a secret. You're not going to just hear charges were declined and never know why. In the cases that we charge, you'll also have that information. We'll put as much information out as we can, understanding that the rules of ethics provide that those cases get tried in court. So we'll put out press releases, we'll put out the information we can. Of course, the rest of it will come out during the court proceedings because we have to treat police officers like everyone else who's in the criminal justice system, and they are entitled to due process under the law. So that's one of the things that my office is doing, but there's a lot more. I just sent a letter out to Congress along with various other AGs around the country. And what we did is we're urging Congress to expand the Violent Crime Control and Enforcement Act of 1994 to allow AGs like myself to have the explicit authority to conduct pattern or practice investigations and to obtain data involving the use of force by law enforcement agencies and bring appropriate enforcement actions in federal court to enforce constitutional policing within our state. And the problem is, right now, only the Department of Justice does that. But they have failed miserably under the current administration. And unfortunately, they're not involved in any of these cases right now. 0 investigations, 0 consent decrees. So we think that if the feds are not going to do it, allow state officials like myself that have been elected by the people of this state to perform those investigations, and if need be, to enter into a consent decree with that department so that we can oversee that particular department. And if it requires additional training, if it requires that the activities of certain officers need to be further scrutinized, then we have the ability to do all of that. So those are some of the things just from the course of the last week. But we have a lot of other things that we're working on, and right now I'm working in concert with the Michigan State Police, and we are working on some proposals that we are going to work with various state legislators on so that there is greater oversight of police officers and police departments. Now, I'm greatly in support of the legislation that just passed in the Senate that would allow for implicit bias training, de-escalation techniques, mental health screenings, and also, and I think people are surprised when they learn that this is not already a requirement, continuing education for police officers so that you're not just trained the very first time when you're in the academy and then you never receive any additional training. I want to change the entire structure of how we oversee police officers and their certification the same way we do with all other professional licenses in the state. If you are an attorney, if you are a judge, if you are a dentist, if you are a doctor, so many, if not most, of these types of professions require state licensing. And then you have one board that all of the complaints, or one commission that all the complaints go to. So, for instance, if you don't like the work that somebody's doing that works, say, at the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, sure, you could make a complaint there, but really, you ought to be making those complaints to the Attorney Grievance Commission, a centralized repository for all complaints, because then you have one board that will oversee those complaints, investigate those complaints, make a decision as to the merits of that complaint, and then there is an escalating scale of discipline, and that can be a reprimand, it can be a suspension, it can even be a revocation of your license to practice law. But we really don't have anything that is similar to that when it comes to certifying police officers. Yes, there are some extreme instances where a police officer can lose their certification, such as if they are convicted of a felony or certain other aggravated misdemeanors, or if they leave a department and then they don't go to another department for a certain length of time, they can lose their certification. But other than that, it's very hard for an officer to lose their ability to be certified under MCOLs. And a lot of times you make reports to a particular police department. Maybe they act on it, maybe they don't. And honestly, most of the time, it's their colleagues at that police department that are investigating them in the first place, which is kind of a recipe for disaster sometimes. I mean, it's not a recipe for transparency and action when these are the same people that officer might work with all the time. So we think that there should be a separate board, and we're working on something legislatively so that you can't have officers that kind of go to department to department to department, and every time they sort of outstay their welcome at one particular department, but they have maybe they've been sued one too many times, maybe there's been one too many complaints, they just pick up and go to another department. We do have laws that say, okay, now, and this is just a recent law that went into effect in 2018, the law might say, okay, well, you know, the department has to retain the reason that person left. But then another department could decide to look at that or decide to completely ignore it. Doesn't even have to ask about their previous history. And another thing that you should know is that in almost every contract that police unions have with those municipalities, they have the ability to purge their disciplinary histories and to do so very rapidly, which is kind of shocking when you think about it, that you could literally pull somebody's personnel file and only see their disciplinary history for the last year or 2 years and not the last 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And that might be, you know, one thing for an officer who's late to work, but what about an officer that, like the one in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, that had 18 disciplinary actions? We wouldn't even know about that. Anyway, so these are just some of the things that we're doing at our office right now, but we are working aggressively, again, in concert with Michigan State Police, to put together some very proactive solutions and measures and to sort of strike while the iron is hot and to ensure that George Floyd, that the legacy of his tragic death can be massive structural reforms and changes so that we make the system, whether it's the system of policing in this country, in this state, or the system of criminal justice, the best and the most fair that it possibly can be. And so that is what I am working on at my office and many other things. I don't want to monopolize this entire conversation, but those are some of the things that we're working on, and I'm very excited to know that it seems like there's a real appetite for change in the state legislature right now and all across this state.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Nessel. We know that you're doing the hard work that's necessary to do the best for the residents in the state of Michigan. So we thank you for that, and thank you for that information. I'd like
Thanks for
to
having
now.
me.
Oh, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Miss Andrea Pierce. She's a member of the Little Travis Bay Bands of Odawa Indians and the co-founder of the Anishinaabe Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. She's also a precinct delegate. And I apologize, Miss Pierce, for if I didn't say that correctly, so please help me out.
There you go. Hi there. Yeah, it's the Anishinaabe Caucus. Thank you. I'm glad to see that we're making progress at this, that the police brutality will slow down and end. I mean, we have to build it up, work on these issues and not ignore them is what I'm afraid would happen. Being that I'm Native American and Anishinaabe, we have a very high rate of incarceration and being put in jail. So I would, and unfair sentencing also is another issue that I've seen among people of color that we have to deal with. Brock Turner, right? He got away with, he got sentenced, 6 months and serves 3. If somebody else did the same crime, would have been in jail for a very long time, years even. And there's just a very difference of how people of color get treated and sentenced as opposed to non-people of color. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's something that we need to work on also.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's been, something that we say from way back, there's the justice system and then there's just us. And that's something that obviously has to change. And also we have to have the system so that it works, equitably for everybody and not just for the wealthy, because that's something that too oftentimes, we see that people are in jail or different things like that because of just not having the money to post bail. Is there anything, I know you talked about in the Native American community that you see specifically that needs to be changed?
Well, like I was saying, the reasons why we get stopped, get put in jail, the incarceration rates need to change on that. The sentencing needs to be worked on. So like you said, it is fair and equitable. Trying to think of what else. I had a whole list. But we need to change things so that when somebody, and also how the social media and the press handles it. When a person of color gets arrested, we see everything they've ever done in the world that was wrong. And then when a non-person of color, you say, oh, he was a swim coach, he was a father of 6, he's this, he's that, and it's all whitewashed and changed. And then with our people, or with people of color, we get, oh, they were thrown in jail one time for crossing the street or drunk driving. And it's just not fair all the way across. We need to work on that also. Because then we get tried before we even get into the court system. It's already known who you are and everything you've ever done. So, it's a bad system right now. We have work to do.
Oh, yes, we definitely have plenty of work to do. And I think you bring up important points there as far as, like this year's a presidential election, but voting down ballot, especially when it comes to prosecutors' office, and things like that, people have to pay attention and educate themselves on, because they have so much leeway in what they're allowed to do or not do with charges or different things like that, that it does make a difference. The same with judgeship. So you're right. I mean, there's a lot of work to do, and it's just something that we'll all have to continue to do what we can to make things better. Now I'd like to introduce the City of Ypsilanti's Sustainability Commissioner, a lifelong citizen of Ypsilanti's South Side, where I grew up on the South Side, Mr. Bryan Foley.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend Joe Rutherford, and thank you, Attorney General, for being here, Sheriff Jared Clayton, the other panelists, my colleague in Ypsi, Can I Share, Gail Summerhill, for having the integrity to create this group and to bring this panel together. And just a little backdrop, as Joe said, I'm a I take pride that I'm a lifelong Southside Ypsilanti resident. I am a fourth generation Foley. Right now living, we are in our seventh, going into our eighth generation. My grandfather, Jesse James Foley, actually came to Ypsilanti escaping what will be called Klansmen from Little Arkansas to find a home and make a home here in Ypsilanti. And he was instrumental in my upbringing, as I am the oldest grandchild. And as we know that sometimes parents, when they work, they leave with their grandchild. So I have a lot of history with me. Share a little quick backdrop to understand where I'm coming from. I'm a little bit unique in a way. My father is a retired City of Ypsilanti police officer. My cousin is a retired City of Ypsilanti police officer. My uncle is a retired City of Ypsilanti police officer. My auntie is a former Washtenaw County sheriff. My family is deeply rooted in Ypsilanti. As you just heard, in Ypsilanti law enforcement. I have cousins in New York who are police officers. My story varies a little bit from this because I chose to consciously live a life of crime. I spent time in the penitentiary, sell drugs, and stuff like that. So I have a street knowledge, and being raised by police officers, I kind of see both sides. And I'm able to sit down and listen to both sides of the story and have an understanding on both sides of the story before making a decision. I pride myself in being able to sit in Chief Tagusi's office, leave Chief Tagusi's office. Then you might see me hanging out on the corner with the dope boys. Then you might see me hanging out on the corner with the dope boys. And then you might see me going into Chief Tagusi's office. No, I'm not a informer, and I'm not a snitch, right? And I'm not somebody who works for the police department. I'm simply a person who's respected in this community of high integrity, and nobody questions my goings and comings because they know that I'm here for one purpose, and that is here to help eliminate systemic racism, as not only in the country, but as it flows from the mayor's office all the way through the last and lowest appointment of employee of the city of Ypsilanti. So that's how I function. That's why I'm here. That is my mission. That is my calling. And I take that seriously for that. Gail entitled this, or our group entitled this, What's Next? Community Healing and Empowerment Through Faith. So when I looked up that word healing, healing means to repair. It's a synonym for repair. Faith is a synonym for truth. So if we're going to heal through empowerment, we're going to have to still tell the truth about what the pain we are healing from. We have never healed from the pain from chattel slavery, from we have people who are racially classified as black, melanated people, African American, or whatever you choose to label yourself. We came into this country, those of us who were brought here, some of us were already here before Europeans came here, but our purpose here was for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to do the bidding of the system of white supremacy, otherwise known as capitalism, or whatever you want to call it. And that was our sole purpose. Even though the 13th Amendment eliminated slavery, we do know that the second clause in there says, except for the commission of a crime, well, our crime is that we are racially classified as black. Simply by being black in America is a crime. And the easiest thing to do in America is to accuse a black man of a crime. So we have to understand what we're working with and what we're dealing with. Earlier last year, I was on a panel with Chief Tagusi as well as my good friend, Sergeant Eugene Rush, breaking down the history of the police department and the understanding that the sheriff's department, not simply our sheriff's department, but all sheriff's department, police departments were created for one purpose, and that purpose alone, and that was to be the slave patrol. And we have involved all police departments involved from the patrolling of slaves. Here in America, we still hold the status of being an enslaved people because we are still here in 2020 talking about the same conditions that occurred when we first brought to these shores, or those of us who already here were placed into enslavement. So what we're dealing with when we're talking about healing, we have to talk about the truthfulness of our pain. And what we have is we have a pebble in our soul, not our S-O-L-E, but our S-U-L. And we're walking around hurting, and we don't even know why we're hurting. Because epigenetically, that whip that was hit on the back of my great, whoever grandparents' back, that pain is still transferred epigenetically through trauma and stress, through his ancestors all the way from me. And I'm still suffering from that pain and that trauma because we have never healed from that. So when we start talking about repair, we have never been repaired. We have never been made whole. And that's obvious because we're still talking about racism in the year 2020 right now. So in order for us to heal, we have to first understand that pain, and we have to be truthful and honest about the cause of that pain. So when those of us who do see police officers, sheriff, law enforcement agencies, that resonates into our soul the same way that escaped slaves, who when they first seen those in the slave patrol, we'll be just beginning to understand the depth of our trauma. Fortunately, some of us have had the ability to seek treatment, counseling, and therapy from that. And I happen to be just one of those to been able to do that and to understand exactly why I'm feeling and why I acted out on the way that I do, or the way that I did, and have the ability to sit down with some of our young men and women in our community to help them understand where they at and what they're going through and how to respond appropriately when they do see law enforcement officers. So through Ypsi, can I share this group that Gail helped to form, and I'm just simply a member, following her vision, as you said. We are actively engaging out to get people not simply to register to vote, but to understand what the voting process is about, and also to engage those people who are seeking office in our communities to let them know that this will no longer be business as usual. I just want to summarize. In 1964, Malik El Haj-Shabazz, who you call Malcolm X, he had a speech in Detroit, and what he said was the bullet or the ballot. He said, freedom for all, I believe what he said, or freedom for no one. And is that critical this year? Our young men and our young women right now are on the front line, and they are actively and willing and ready to bring about change by any means necessary. So it's up to the elders and myself and the community to make sure that we guide and direct that energy properly and to channel it and get them to the voting booth, not simply just to register and to vote, but let those who know that if they're going to come into our community and represent us, they are going to have to represent the ideology and the philosophy of our community, and not simply come in and tell us that this is how business is. So that's who I am, and that's what my objective is. Thank you.
Bryan. And that's a lot of great information and great words. Just drill down on that a little bit more. Any suggestions that you would have as far as locally that's going, people locally?
You know what, Joe, what's crazy is, I don't know if I was breaking up, but everything was clear and I could not hear anything you just said. It was breaking up.
I hope I'm not having, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, Joe, yes.
Okay. That was so well stated. I want to thank you. My question is, since you've seen it from both sides, do you have any suggestions to improve things here locally?
Yes, I do. And it first starts with, I heard that right there. I did see both sides. And that's why I have reserved my comments, because I see the flaws in both sides. But how can we do better with situations like this? Starts with me. starts me to be responsible for my own community and be the policeman of my community. And also understanding our community, the trauma, like I said, was going on, but also requires persons such as myself to have the courage to put on that blue uniform, to go out and join the police force, the sheriff departments, so that they can come and police our community who have an understanding of our community. Right now, I don't know the percentage. I'm pretty sure the sheriff, I know the sheriff can to share more on the ratio of officers from this community who patrol, who out. But what I'm experiencing, I know of no one, be it the sheriff's department, be it the city of Ypsilanti Police Department, other than one or two officers who work in the jail or work in community outreach that are from south side of Ypsilanti. So you have outsiders coming in, policing, patrolling our community, who have no idea of the culture and the language, and they're responding simply, I'm going to say this, on what they have been conditioned to believe on what our community is about. So it begins with us. It begins with us having the courage to step up and be responsible to our community, and also, like I said, be good stewards and policemen of our community, so that we don't invite outside slave patrollers in.
Thank you very, very much, Brian. I appreciate that. Hang on just a minute. Sorry, I'm having some computer issues here for some reason. Next,
That's
I'd
the
like to
FBI.
introduce, oops, it wouldn't surprise me. Believe me, we know about COINTELPRO, so
We know
it's not
about
as surprising
COINTEL.
at this point.
Yeah, and BIE.
Yeah. I'd like to introduce Ms. Hazelette Crosby Robinson. She's a lifelong resident of Washtenaw County, worked for Washtenaw County Community Mental Health for 25 years before retiring, earned her master's degree from the University of Michigan School of Social Work in 2008. Currently serves as the president of the Ypsilanti Township Civil Service Commission. Please take it away, Ms. Crosby Robinson.
Okay, can you hear me? You hear me? Okay, well, first of all, thank you to Ypsilanti Shares and Gail Summerhill for inviting me to this forum. I've been really wanting to get my voice out there. Thank you to all of the distinguished panel members that I have been graced with an opportunity to be a part of. And thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Sheriff Clayton, and everyone else. Thank you, Joel, and the Democratic Party. I'd like to go back to something that Dana had said. Dana, are you still there? Maybe she's still there, can hear me.
I am. I'm still on if you can hear me.
Yes. As a lifelong member of this county, I've been through several sheriffs. I remember way back to Sheriff Harvey when I got arrested as a teenager for being at an after-hour joint. Anyway, all the way up through Minnick, who was terrible, and then we finally ended up with Sheriff Jerry, and I'm just so relieved. First of all, he looks like me. Let me just be honest. He looks like me, and the policies and stuff that he's adopted are straight out of what Obama recommended. I mean, out of that administration. Not only that, the sheriff department doesn't do only just policing and arresting people. They deliver food, they host food drives, clothing drives, they pass out stuff. They do all kind of stuff. They do more, and we have in our sheriff. I've been listening. Okay, so I've been to George Floyd's memorial services. I've watched all of the newscasts. I've cried several days over watching what they did to that man. And You know, and my heart just really hurts for that. And not only that, but it brings back the memories of what happened, like Bryan was saying. It's like residual trauma. It's like being re-traumatized all over again. You know, I was a teenager when we marched in 1967 and then the riots in Detroit, you know, and it just brings everything back. And I can't hardly believe that we're still back at this point. But anyway, so, you know, but the sheriff department, as I was saying, they provide a lot of other services than just arresting people. I'm really upset, and I feel the same way as the sheriff said himself, and I'm sure everybody on this panel. I'm disgusted by what happened to that woman, but this isn't the forum for that. But in the 12 years that we've had our sheriff, you know, he's instituted all kinds of community programs and stuff. And I hear people on the news talking about, well, you know, they want police officers to do mental health counseling. Well, do you realize Derek Jackson has a master's degree in community organization? We have people on our staff who actually have degrees in human services. The sheriff department, I don't know how they did have hired people who are ex-offenders to like be in charge of re-entry. We have a re-entry program in our sheriff department. So, you know, there are a lot of things that are being done in the sheriff department except, you know, other than just being police. So, and I live in Ypsilanti Township. I'm the president of the Civil Service Commission for Ypsilanti Township. And we contract with the sheriff department to provide our police services. So when you're talking about, you know, the sheriff department, I take that personally because I'm paying taxes to be policed by the sheriff department. So, you know, so if you're talking about taking away some services, then, you know, that affects me directly. And unless you can tell me what else is coming in, you know, to do that, let me just say, I feel a little anxious about that. And as far as having, you know, like some outside board deciding whether or not they want to come in and take over our policing services or sheriff department, I'm totally not comfortable with that. That sounds like the whole emergency manager thing that happened when Flint got poisoned. So no, I'm not for that. I'd be a community member. No, I would like to keep, you know, the oversight of our sheriff department, who he's an elected official within our community. Now, if we can figure out some ways to do that, or like maybe be a part of a board, and then on this board, would it be people from Washtenaw County deciding what they're gonna do in this county about, you know, anything that happens here? Oh, I would like it to be somebody, maybe somebody like Bryan, like he said, he's responsible for his community, you know, and as far as, and I've worked for the county for 25 years, and then I can remember in the last 12 years that there's been several recruitment efforts through the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department to recruit African Americans. So if they don't want to come or they can't pass the background check or whatever, that's not really their fault. And I don't even know how I ended up talking about that because I'm not sure this is the forum for that either, but since you asked, I just want to say, I want to continue to work with Jerry on whatever the problems are within the department, and if whatever the Attorney General's office can do to make that an easier process for him, and maybe do something about the strength of the unions, make it impossible, you know, to even get to an officer if they do something wrong. So there you have it.
Thank you so much, Ms. excuse me, Crosby Robinson. Yeah, I mean,
You just
there's a
froze
lot,
up.
and it's interesting you mentioned Sheriff Harvey. Oops, did I freeze up?
Yeah, you're back.
We just switched it for a second because I just had a couple things to say. Okay. I wanted to thank all the people that are here. I know that we had some technical difficulties and people were not able to log in because my email feed is just blowing up that they can't get in, and I've instructed people to call in so that they can at least hear. One of the things that I did want to say to piggyback on what Bryan said was, Ypsi, can I share what we're doing differently as it relates to voting? The first thing we did is I encourage everyone to go to Ypsi Can I Share's website. Well, not a website. We don't have a website yet. Our Facebook page or our YouTube page, so that you can see the empowerment cards that we did. And the empowerment cards are for Ypsilanti to give to all residents, to let them know who their elected officials are currently until the next election cycle. Their names, their phone numbers, and their email addresses and their positions are on there. And that's how we empower people, to let them know these are elected officials and they work for you. For whatever reason, no one has ever taken the charge to let people know, because the words that I really do not like is everybody knows. No, everybody doesn't know. And that's why it is so important to empower people. Going forward on this election for Ypsilanti, like Bryan said, it will be different, because what we are doing under Ypsi Can I Share is every single person that's on the ballot, we will be reaching out to them to do a 2-minute video of questions that we have given them. Not that it's a canned speech, but we have given you the questions that we want answered. And so we will have a link that will look just like the ballot, and you'll see a name. And then you'll click on it, and the hyperlink will show you the video of that person. Many times we know people, but we don't know their names. We've seen them multiple times, but we don't know who is Annie Somerville. We don't know her, but we've seen her, we've heard her. Lois Richardson. I mean, people are seen and spoken in so many different environments that they just don't know the name. So this is something that I feel, and the rest of our team feels, that it's important to empower people, to give them education. And I urge everyone on the call, please, 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 stop using the words register to vote and go vote. If you don't know how to vote, if you've never voted before, then you need to think about the words that we're telling people. I bake very well. Now, I can make a German chocolate cake very good. Now, if I said to somebody, you know, just go in there and bake a German chocolate cake, it surely is not going to turn out like mine. We have to have instructions. We have to be kind to people. We have to lead with our hearts when we're trying to explain something to people that they don't know. I am the first one here to say I did not know about politics. I've learned a whole lot in the last couple of years. I just happened to be in places and spaces and ask questions so that I could learn more. So if it was me that didn't know, then I know that there are a lot of other people that don't know. Now that I've said that, I'm going to turn this over and thank everyone. Thank everyone for participating, and we want to go to question and answer. So I'll let Annie take that piece over. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. A few folks were asking questions throughout the conversation, so I'm going to try my best to circle back on those. And then if you have any additional questions, you can just either put them in the comments for the webinar chat, or there's also a Q&A feature. I didn't see that anybody had posted a question in the comments on the event from the Facebook page. If I missed that, though, just share them on here and I'll be able to circle back with you. I also just wanted to point out earlier on in the comments, Gail Wilkoff shared a link that the students that she works with at Educated Youth produce. So if you all have time to circle back to that link, I think she is hoping that folks will view that for the kids that put it together. Someone earlier in the discussion asked how deeply the social media accounts for police officers is scrutinized. So I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe Sheriff Clayton.
Sure. Yeah, I was looking at that. I was hoping you'd ask that question. So, not nearly as closely as they should be. They're really more reactive. We've had a number of situations where we have come up. We randomly will look at website, social media, and when we see um, postings or likes that indicate something that's contrary to our values, then we address it. One of the challenges, and trust me, people that are far more apt at social media can speak to this better than I. But one of the things that we run into is, a lot of those chats are those closed chats, where you have to try to gain entry in, and there are all sorts of things going on. So we've got a social media policy that we're getting ready to roll out because we just updated it. That will be posted publicly as well. But that is a challenge, getting into those closed chats and seeing. Oftentimes we'll get information from someone else and then we can follow up, but not nearly as proactive in terms of monitoring as you would think.
Awesome. And then just another comment / question from Commissioner Ricky Jefferson to the sheriff. I think this goes back to your earlier comment about hiring more deputies for the county. And he's asking if you could release and distribute that through different social media channels and places like Park Ridge Community Center, which I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yeah, so this is the part. So we do that a lot. So if you go to Washtenaw, www.washtenaw.sheriff.org, there's a button there that says we are hiring. If you hit that, it takes you to everything. We have staff that go all over both the county and all over the state to recruit. And I'll say this, and I'm glad we're having this forum. Anybody that's listening to this, that's interested in or know someone or want us to come to Park Ridge, any community center to talk about what we do, we will go. And I think I responded to somebody in here. I want to be really clear. We're sponsoring a lot of people. So what sponsoring means is we will hire you before you go to the academy. We will pay for you to go to the academy. We will pay you while you're in the academy. And the other thing with the sheriff's office that's different than other places, we also do 100% reimbursement on education. I'm gonna say that again, 100%. So we've had people come to us that want to get their bachelor's, they get that. We'll pay for your master's. We've even paid for people to get a JD. The only thing we don't pay for you in education are the fees that come along with school. But that's 100%. We'll go wherever you want us to go to recruit, bring people in, and walk them through the process. It has been one of the things that I've talked about and we have worked on for 12 years now, trying to diversify the organization. We've been really successful in diversifying corrections, but we have been less than successful in diversifying road patrol. But we're getting there because we're slowly but surely chipping away. So if anybody's interested or knows someone that's interested or knows somewhere for us to go, please let me know and we will be there.
Awesome. And then someone earlier had asked which organization you run, Hazelette. I don't know if you have a link or anything that you could share in the comments.
So I'm the president of the board of directors. I don't run the organization. We have an executive director who is Mary King. It used to be Michigan Council on Crime and Delinquency, but now it's the Michigan Center for Youth Justice. And you can just look us up, look up our website. And we are instrumental in criminal justice reform as it relates to young people. So we were really instrumental in Raise the Age campaign that finally got passed in the House and the Senate, and that's what we do. As far as the Civil Service Commission, that's just a board that I was appointed to by Brenda Stumbo that oversees the fire department in Ypsilanti Township, where I live.
Okay, and it looks like Gail has a question. Gail, do you want to unmute your mic and ask now?
Thank you. This is a question for Attorney General Dana Nessel. I've spoken with several law enforcement officers in light of the marches. And one of the things, the questions that people have for me is that the policies that are put in place, from Lansing are policies that do not reflect people who are actually doing the jobs, and they don't feel that they have enough on the ground experience to be able to follow the type of policies that are given. And the suggestion was that when people are making policies, that they should have people on the front lines, on the middle, and higher up, so that you can represent. And this would be in all hiring practices where people make policies, that you have frontline workers who are actually doing the jobs to know the difficulties of carrying out policies.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me say this. In terms of policies that are promulgated from Lansing, yeah, don't we wish that everyone who was in the state legislature would, if they don't have experience in a particular field, would actually listen to the experts in that field. And unfortunately, very frequently that doesn't occur. Now, in the olden days, I'm told that what they used to do is have people who came from those fields testify on every bill that was proposed and what their perspective was, and that it was a lengthy process in terms of ensuring that whatever laws we had, that you had enough input from people who actually practiced in those fields. But now, that's not really how things work, and my understanding, and from being in Lansing only now for about a year and a half, I'd never worked in state government before, is that you just try to push your bill through as quickly as possible so that people who have better insight don't have time to object, and you can get that through, generally on behalf of whatever special interest group it was that was, pushing it in the first place. So yeah, I would agree. There are a lot of things that end up going into policy and that are passed into law that don't have enough input from the people who are best situated to know about that. So that is a significant problem. There's no question about that. And we need to do better. But let me speak to something that you kind of touched on, Gail, in terms of that question. And that is this. In order for law enforcement to reflect the qualities that we want them to have, to truly have people who who understand how to police in a way where they are helping the communities they serve and not hurting them. We really have to be able to recruit the best and the brightest. I love the work that Sheriff Clayton is doing to ensure that happens. But when I look at the importance of diversifying police forces, one of the biggest problems is that it's not a very attractive place to work anymore in law enforcement. The fact is we have that, Lansing has done everything in its power to ensure that police departments don't have the proper funding, and they don't have the proper pay that they used to have. They don't have the proper retirement or medical benefits that they used to have. They can't access the training that we really need to have to do their jobs correctly. And so when I hear these calls to defund the police, it really bothers me, because I think so many of these problems could be fixed by better funding the police and allowing us to recruit the absolute best and brightest individuals into that field who have a better understanding of their communities and have better training. And yeah, you're right. We don't need to have tanks. We don't need to militarize the police, but there are so many things that we do need to have in order for law enforcement to operate correctly. And I'm very upset by this turn of events. Like, nobody would ever say, like, oh, do you want better teachers? Well, let's pay them as little as possible. Nobody would ever say that. You want the best teachers? You have to pay them an appropriate salary, and you have to train them properly, and you have to educate them properly. Well, it's the same thing. It's not any different than, police departments and police officers. And I guess what's bothering me, what's upsetting me, is that I've worked in the criminal justice system my entire career, and I know so many. I know it seems like there's a lot of attacks on people if you have the audacity to say, hey, there's a lot of good cops out there, but there are so many great cops out there. And there are ways we can make significant systemic changes so that we can have police forces that we feel so much more comfortable with. And yes, we need more social workers. Of course we do. And yes, we need more mental health training. We need all of those things, but that mean that we also have to strip police departments of every dime that they have in order to have that. We can have both if we just prioritize better than we are doing right now. And yes, I believe that an educational system that works for everybody, especially minority communities, especially for African Americans, especially for people of color, will allow us to have less issues when it comes to law enforcement later. And you should be putting your money into education, but it doesn't have to be an either or. There's so many ways that we can properly fund government agencies that we need in the state and make it a better place for everybody. So I'm sorry, that was a lot of rambling. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I just, I felt like a lot of that needed to be said. And again, I think it's really easy to look from the outside and to say, well, I don't like this about law enforcement, but until you've actually worked in the system, you're right, you can't really know what needs to be fixed and what needs to be changed and how to go about doing that.
So,
Gil, just could you give me like a less than a minute to just respond to what the Attorney General said?
Sure.
So thank you. So first off, let me say I appreciate what the Attorney General has said, and look, I appreciate her integrity. That's why it was not a hard call to reach out to her immediately when our incident happened to ask her office to take a look at what the report that they're going to get. And I'll just say this, not knowing what's going to happen, I have 100% faith that her office will follow the law, and whatever they decide will be fair, and obviously we will abide by it and respect it from our perspective. As it relates to the defunding, really, really quick, I have many friends that I'm down with. I've been at Center for American Progress meetings and policing project meetings at NYU with police abolitionists in the room, and I call some of them my friends, and they have talked about abolishing the police. And so we agree to disagree. We agreed. So I say, okay, until that happens, let's find out how we work together. But as people start talking about defunding or funding at a different level, I'm open to that discussion if you want to have it, but let's have it be strategic and deliberate and have it be a thoughtful discussion. And let's talk about, from a community perspective, what do we want? How do we want to live? What are the outcomes that we want? And then talk about the path that it takes to get there. What are the different components? Because this is not just about policing. This is about from a societal perspective. We're not just talking about changing the police culture. We got to talk about changing societal culture and what our expectations are about everything. So every time we make this decision around funding, and funding is a moral position that elected officials take. So let's have that discussion, put it out there. But as you start to shift funding, also start to shift expectations of the different departments and offices that you are going to fund. So if you're going to fund differently, and you're going to shift responsibility, shift expectations, and all of that, I'm all for it. I'm all for having the conversation. But let's understand, we get what we pay for. Here's the last piece I'll say. Here's where I think the public has the right to protest, to challenge, to demand better from us. So if it's your taxpayer dollars that are funding us, you're doggone right. You have every right to challenge how we do it. But as we challenge it, let's do it thoughtfully and strategically, so we don't make knee-jerk reactions to move things around without understanding the unintended consequences of those decisions. So I'm always willing, let's sit down at the table and have a discussion, but let's do it in a thoughtful way with an eye not only on what's going on today, but for the future as well.
Yeah, so we had a question in the comments related to that. So I think you covered your response there with that. I see a few more. Let me see. Someone made a comment. The policing of schools is also a major issue in terms of messaging and in the further traumatization of youth. I just want to put a plug in. There's actually an agenda item up tomorrow night at the YCS school board meeting. And I believe the item is to decide to remove the presence of police on campus at YCS. I'm not sure who asked that question. Trying to skim through all of these, or made that comment. Just wanted to plug that in. Let's see. Why are police allowed to take our equipment and use it against us? I'm not sure if that means electronic equipment, maybe. I think that came from Andrea, if you want to elaborate more on that.
So I see in that question, they were talking about using, police departments are hire themselves out as private security, protecting pipelines and things like that. That does not happen here. I've done work in New Orleans and places like that where that actually does happen, where the staff can have a second job where they're protecting restaurants and that and using the city resources to do that. I find that quite interesting. You can't do that. You can have second employment here, but if you're going to do that, especially if it's got anything to do with security, we're really strict on that. Washington County Sheriff's Office doesn't protect pipelines. We're very, very clear on that. We don't subcontract out to do that. So those two things, I just want to put out there as a response. And I'll just add for the schools, I hear that discussion, and I've told my staff, I'm not going to argue against it. If the school district's decision is to move away from school resource officers and reinvest that money elsewhere, then I believe the school districts are representative of other people, then they do that. But again, let's do it in a thoughtful way and understand the unintended consequences of that. And I would also say this, all school resource officers and all police department, sheriff's office, school relationships are the same. I would encourage people to get the YCS Memorandum of Understanding between the Washington County Sheriff's Office and YCS. It clearly lays out that none of our staff are to get involved in any behavior that we got involved with when we were kids. That was just us being knuckleheads, and we should not be criminalizing that behavior. So we clearly have that delineated. And I'll end with this. I had a conversation with a different school superintendent that was calling our SRO in to handle things that they should be handling and their teachers should be handling. And I clearly told them we're not doing that. And if you call us again, you don't have to worry about canceling the contract. We'll cancel the contract. So if that's what YCS direction they decide to take, I'll support it.
All right, and then I think we have time for one more question. Is there any discussion about changing police training? It seems that the police have become more militarized.
So I'll answer that one too. I have this conversation with, so I think I understand what they mean by militarized and all that. So our training, whatever you want to know about our training, we started doing what we call managing interpersonal interaction training almost 4 years ago, which includes procedural justice, implicit bias. Washington Sheriff's Office was the genesis of the 2-day managing mental health crisis training that was adopted by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. We do a number of different trainings. We actually look at our training, our dollars and hours, to make sure that we don't have 80 to 90% of our training time and dollars on firearms and defensive tactics, and less hours on the interpersonal stuff that we know our staff use most of the time. That will be on our dashboard too, and we're going to release all of that so you see the percentage of time we train staff in different hours. So the training question is very important, and I wrote a response to something else in there. Training policy, all that's important, but it's the organizational culture that is the cornerstone and foundation of ultimately how staff will behave.
Awesome, thank you. And then I think that was all we had time for, and Gail's gonna close us up. Thanks everyone, sorry for any of the technical difficulties. I'm still, I'm a millennial, but I'm not that great at Zoom either, so.
Okay. I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for being here. I think this is, from my perspective, to have a conversation with people from all levels, and where we're mixing community, we're mixing elected officials together so that we're bridging a gap in positions. I look at all people not by your temporary title, but just as you as a person. So anybody, you know, other people that know me, yeah, I'm Gail, and you are whatever your name is, not defined by your temporary title. So I think that if we continue to work together in a respectful manner, as we have done here, just to give information that we might have from a community side to the elected officials and to all elected officials, so that they might hear from the people that don't necessarily, who are not necessarily invited to the tables, to be able to express how they feel and what they're thinking, or how can we work better together. So I really appreciate you being here. Is Dana still on?
Yep, I'm here. I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think this is something that we should do more often, so that at least we're meeting the needs of the community, and we're all working together to make a better county, state, United States. So I think it takes all of us to do that. And for those of us who have the courage and to be able to step up and to speak out for your truths to be heard, I think that this is a start of something that I will continue to do, to make sure that we're all talking and listening respectfully to each other. I do want to apologize for the people. I have numerous texts, for whatever reason, they could not get into the Zoom meeting. And so I've got a lot of answering to do, other than this was the link that I shared. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to tape it for people to hear at a later time. I don't know as far, and we'll talk about that later. But thank you again to Attorney General Dana Nessel, and thank you for giving your time for the entire time in this conversation. Thank you to Clayton, Andrea Pierce, Bryan Foley, Hazelette Robinson, and Joe Rutherford for being a part. Thank you a special thank you to Amy Somerville, who works tirelessly for everyone, Jeff Irwin's constituents, as well as being on City Council, the City of Ypsilanti. If I'm calling it wrong, forgive me, but in all that you do, and still have time to help me with my technical difficulties. And thank you to Ypsi Can I Share for helping me behind the scenes, that all that you do, so that we can continue to move forward and empower people and lead with our hearts, and stop blaming, but what can we do next? So I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Gail.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gail. Thank you, everybody. All right.
Thank you, Gail.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for coming.